Trump v. Biden. Biden v. Trump. In truth, we didn't know what to call this episode. I think we just said Trump first because he's the incumbent president. Maybe that's the formal way you're supposed to write it.
Yeah, we'll decide through a coin toss which the episode will actually be named. But that's what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about the two platforms, not that Trump has a platform, but their stances on some major issues.
Yeah, I think the way we can describe the coming conversation is that it's not going to be a really in-depth briefing of policy, because neither of us are that in the know about American politics. What I like about this is that it's going to be two outsider perspectives, and especially talking about my own view, my own participation, I guess, from afar in this election, or at least receiving news. It's been really peripheral. I haven't been following it day by day, or hour by hour, as a lot of people do.
Yes.
Every new development, every new scandal, every new mistake or good thing that happens. Just because I did that in 2016 with the US election, and it's exhausting.
It is.
And it's crushing. And also because I think this is a more accurate way in which most Americans, we're not Americans, but in which most Americans vote. You know, most people don't follow the news like that. The majority of voters just kind of take it in from headlines, see sound bites on the news, maybe see a bit of the debate, and just kind of go from there. So I think that's interesting because we're giving that perspective.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over the two platforms of the Democrats and Republicans, and we're also going to be talking about the two candidates, probably in a little bit more length than we talk about the platforms. And I think we're just going to be talking miscellaneous election stuff about the state of democracy in America in 2020.
Yeah, that'll be the chunk of it, I think, because everyone kind of knows the two different candidates, their personalities and stuff.
True. Yeah.
So it's not like we're going to be like uncovering these things that people didn't know. Say like, oh, Biden really is into climate change and Trump isn't. People are going to be like, what? No one's going to do that. So we're just going to discuss kind of our perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah, they're both known quantities.
Yes.
So this is more about our opinion, and we should perhaps preface, it's not remotely objective. We're both completely biased. We both kind of are quite left-leaning, progressive. Whether Biden exactly matches that remains to be seen. But we are most definitely in the camp of anyone but Trump.
Indeed. And it'd be hard. I can imagine if I was American, I would just really just not want to vote for Biden. I'd want to vote Green or vote whatever other party, but just not Biden. But you don't really have an option. I feel like you have to vote for Biden.
Well, we talked about this. I said if I was in a swing state, I'd vote Biden just because the fear of Trump winning is too strong. But if I was in a state which was guaranteed to be Democrat, like if I was in California somewhere, I would just vote Green just because I think it's important that they rack up some votes. So you went through the Biden platform, the Democrat platform. You said that it was very in-depth.
Very.
Where do you want to start?
I'm going to start a bit about Biden because I didn't know too much about him because I don't know. I feel like politicians in America are like personalities. Like people know Biden's past. I know a lot of like where people went to university, where they've been senators before, their jobs.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to learn a little bit about him because I didn't know that because I'm not American. So Biden was born in 1942 and he became a lawyer in 1969. And those were like the first two facts I read about him. And then my thought was segregation wasn't abolished until 1964. So like he's old.
Yeah.
He got his lawyer degree and his undergrad when segregation was still legal. So he studied these laws which allowed people to exclude people based on the color of their skin. And I was like, that's old. So he's obviously made some mistakes, but we have to forgive him for that, I think. And just say he's representing a party of people who include the likes of, well, I guess they're mainly socialists, but Alexandria Cortez, Bernie, he's kind of representing the left, so we have to forgive him for his mistakes because he's old, I guess.
Well, I mean, I don't even know if you can call... Obviously today, in today's light, they're deemed mistakes, but at the time it's you wouldn't expect him to be some bastion of equality. I know there were a lot of people fighting for that, but I just see 75-year-old white guy, middle class from America, and I think, yeah, of course, has some beliefs or had some beliefs which are wildly different to what are ethical today.
Yeah. And I couldn't find any things that he'd actually fought for. He never tried to repeal any
No, I mean he passed a lot of mass incarceration laws.
Yeah, that'd be his main caveat. But anyway, So that's just a little tiny like disclaimer of Biden. Not the best, but at least not Trump. Anyway, he ran for president before, twice. So in 1988 and 2008, he was running to be like the Democratic nominee, the person that they were putting forward.
Okay.
And he lost both times, obviously. And in 1988, it was because he had 2 brain aneurysms and then 2 brain surgeries. And then 2008, obviously, Obama, and then he was chosen as the vice president. He served as the vice president for 8 years, which is a pretty great experience. If I saw that on someone's resume and say, yeah, they could probably be president. Biden's a pretty cool guy. In one of his campaigns as well, I read something that was used against him was that he was accused of plagiarism in university. I was like, can you imagine if in the presidential debate now that's how far they had to dig to find dirt on someone?
That's
So
true.
like,
But I
oh,
guess they would
you-
say it's indicative of a lack of integrity or something.
Anyway, I thought that was funny. I was like, imagine like cheating on a paper in university and that being held against you running for president. That would just be so sucky.
I also wonder how it was proven.
It was because it was on his records and he had to like redo a year because of it.
Oh, wow.
Like he did plagiarize, but he didn't apparently know that it was plagiarism or something.
He knew. Uncle Joe knew.
Yeah. He was never great in school, but he was always like a natural leader, and we were reading a bit about he has a stutter and he's like clearly overcome that quite a bit through reciting poetry in the mirror and giving speeches and
Yeah,
such.
I loved watching that. We watched the PBS in-depth video they made about this election, and I didn't realize that Biden had a stutter and had suffered with that all his life. And it made me feel pretty bad for like making fun of his various mistakes in the primary debates and speeches and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's very cool that he overcame that.
Yeah, and when we were watching
But I feel like most people just don't know that.
No, most people don't.
Like, that's the issue. They should definitely get that out there more.
I think so. When we were watching the debate, we were just watching the last like 2 minute, like their closing statement, and you could tell when Trump starts like calling out his son and stuff, he gets worked up and then like starts to stutter a bit. And I'm like, if people didn't know, they would just think he's like a poor
Well, I
debater.
just
like
thought he
breaking
had.
under the pressure. Or
I just
whatever.
thought he was suffering from cognitive decline with his age.
Yeah.
But now I know it's not that. But I can definitely forgive people for thinking that because it's just not common knowledge, I think, that he had a stutter.
Yeah. I feel like Joe's a very sympathetic person. Like his history, I was reading about his parents and stuff, and he's overcome some stuff, and he like fought hard to get an education and become a senator and everything. So I respect Joe.
Me too.
Pretty good candidate, and I think he's good because people can rally around him because he's so sympathetic, and we can say like he's been like overcoming bullies all his life, and now he has to overcome like the final boss. Anyway, I like Joe. So
Okay.
now onto his platform.
Sure.
I began with post-secondary education. His platform covered literally everything in the sun. He had like sections about his relationships with like the Latin American community, the Jewish community, the Catholic community, everything. Like he has thought about everything, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Very lefty, having thought about literally everyone and like putting something out there to, like, I want to say appease everyone because it's not like he can actually get all of this stuff done in 4 years.
Exactly. It's an election. You're trying to get elected.
Yeah.
That's why I think going over the platform is secondary to discussing the other things about the elections because
I think so.
it's rare that promises are kept.
Yeah, but we can hope some of these promises are kept about equality and climate change and healthcare. But we'll see. Once he's elected, speak that into existence. Anyway, so about post-secondary education, he was working to make 2 years of college free for any hard-working students, so basically having a bunch more scholarships that are federally funded, invest in apprenticeships, communities, facilities, and social security, make public college free to anyone whose family makes below $125,000 per year, and then anyone making less than $25,000 per year won't owe or accrue interest on their student loans. And there's also this thing that they do in the States, or maybe there's this thing that he wants there to be in the States where if you're a public servant, so you're teaching in education, the government, police force, that you get $10,000 per year forgiven from your debt for up to 5 years.
Whoa.
So for us, that would like solve our debt issue. But Americans have hundreds of thousands in student debt, but I think that's a good idea. Encourage people to serve and have these cool jobs working in the government. So they're making money plus also having some of their loans forgiven.
Of course.
So those were like the highlights of his post-secondary education thing. He was also said a bit about there's some universities in America which are for profit, and they almost always don't actually promote education. They're just there to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So he said he's going to work with them to be less greedy and like put the students first and shut them down if they refuse to put the students first, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, says the right things.
Yeah. Is Trump saying anything on post-secondary?
Oh, you're looking for Trump's views on the official Republican views on the same topic?
Well, yeah.
No, not so much.
So no?
I did manage to find the Republican platform. You know, remember I was looking for it online? I went on the Trump website and it just wasn't there. The only remotely similar section was a tab that said promises kept from the 2016 election. So there's just kind of this implicit assumption with the Trump campaign, which is that he said everything en route to election in 2016 and people are voting for the same thing. But what I think that really means is that the campaign's not about the issues at all. It's just about what he stands for, which is various things we'll get into later. But I did manage to find the official Republican platform. I had to dig through the Republican website, which is separate from the Elect Trump website.
Okay.
And it's a PDF at the bottom of the page from the 2016 election. And that's their official platform.
Oh my gosh.
And there wasn't anything on post-secondary.
So what was on the Trump website then?
Well, there was, like, you go on it and there's a big pop-up for his video that he's recently released from the hospital, addressing the nation, reassuring us all of his health. And the tabs on the top say, donate, shop, promises kept.
Hats and signs.
Yeah, and then maybe about us, about him and Vice President Pence.
Okay. I went on the Trump website as well, and it's basically just like a clothing website. And I was just like, whoa, this is such a capitalist, consumer-driven.
I mean, every campaign has that. They have to fund it somehow.
I know, like Biden has merch, but it's nowhere near the front. It's ugly, yes, yeah. Anyway.
That's probably why they hide it on the website.
Yeah. So next I had gun violence. Every year, nearly 40,000 Americans die as a result of firearm injury. That seems like a very big public security and public health issue.
Yep.
Over the last 4 years, 500,000 fugitives were deleted from the background check system that was put into place at Biden's lobbying. So he's the one that got that passed 10 or 20 years ago, that people had to have a background check before they could buy a weapon.
Okay.
And then Trump just made 500,000 fugitives disappear from that database, and Biden promises to get those people back in there. He also wants to, currently, if your background check doesn't go through in 3 days, you can just buy the weapon. And Biden wants to extend that to 10 days. But I'm like, if your background check doesn't go through, you shouldn't just get to buy it, because then someone, it's so twisted. He's going to prohibit online sales, because apparently right now you can just buy an assault rifle on Amazon.
Of course you
can.
And then that's called the free market.
And then he's also going to try and buy back as many of the like militarized weapons, like the automatics, semi-automatics, the loaded magazines, whatever. He's going to try and buy back.
I can tell you're a real gun nerd. Yeah. You know, the loaded...
TR-47s, the 6.34s.
The loaded magazines, whatever.
There's like spring-loaded ones or something. I was reading it on there.
Spring-loaded.
Anyway, he's going to try and buy back as many of those and then just like stop people from stockpiling weapons.
What do you think about guns?
Guns are dumb. But it's just silly to me. It's like, don't sell guns to your population, especially if 40,000 people are dying due to weapons
Gun
every
control
year.
in America is just like that one thing which gives me no hope for the future of that country.
No.
Only despair.
It's
the
ridiculous.
fact that, like, even the numbers don't even matter, but I mean, when you have schools being shot up, that should just be enough, but the gun culture is so foundational there.
It's ridiculous. Like, if that happened anywhere else, it would just be like, this is
the people would be like,
issue.
all right, we need to do something.
Yeah, they'd be willing to sacrifice their own personal whatever reason they have for holding guns, but they don't. Also, if you're a gun manufacturer and someone like uses your rifle to like shoot up any event or whatever, they can't be held accountable.
The
Or
gun
even if
manufacturer? Well, they probably shouldn't be.
I don't know. If like they're profiting off of violence.
What we should mention with gun violence is a good introduction to the topic of big money in American politics, because most Republicans and many Democrats through the years have been funded by the NRA, including Trump, I think. I don't understand why this is why I like my outsider perspective, because people who are
really into politics.
really into politics and have a lifetime experience be like, oh, well, there's the NRA and there's lobbying, and I'm like, why is there any of it? Why is that?
Yeah, democracy is about the people, not about the companies.
It's just completely bad. There's nothing good about it.
No, it doesn't make any sense to me.
There is no benefit. None of it should be allowed.
No, it's like...
That's my very nuanced take on it.
If you're trying to come up with like a new food security program, Sobeys shouldn't be able to lobby you.
Sobeys being a big Canadian grocery store chain.
Yeah, what's American grocery store chains? I don't know. Walmart, we'll say.
Walgreens.
Walgreens shouldn't be able to sponsor you. I'm sorry. But if you're trying to figure out how do we get food to Americans, and these companies which get food to Americans by making money are lobbying you, you're not going to make food accessible. It's just like, that's simple. And that's just not crazy left-wing socialism. It's just like, that's not even democracy if you have these companies lobbying you.
I think we're going to come across as kind of condescending towards the American voting populace in this episode, but I'm kind of sympathetic towards them because it's split completely 50-50 on most issues. So even when you are like outright condemning them, you're only outright condemning half of them. And two, issues like gun control do have a lot of support among the people that isn't reflected in the politics.
Yeah.
So, and we're not the best to speak about that incongruity between what the people want and what actually happens. But for sure, it's largely the blame of these like big corporations that are lobbying, and again, or big organizations that are lobbying. And again, that's something that the people are against. Like most people be like, Americans would say, yeah, those big organizations shouldn't have any financial sway in politics. The issue is, how do you actually get them out?
Yeah, and you can elect someone who says they're going to get them out, but they're probably sponsored by them.
Well, even then, their backs against the wall because they have to pass things, and it doesn't work through the Senate and the Congress and whatever.
There's no like true democracy in the world. Some of them are kind of close, but America's very far away from a true democracy.
Yeah,
look
of
up
course.
the democracy compass online and just like look at the different companies because like some dictatorships claim to be a democracy, and it's just like
I think America's something like an oligarchy. My impression is that I know there's corruption at the PTA, the Parent Teacher Association, but my impression is that the bigger the democracy gets, the harder it becomes to keep from corruption. The more local it gets, I think the more smoother it works. I know everyone gripes about their local mayor, or as I said, the PTA. I just think it's easier to hold them accountable. There's less bureaucracy in the way, things like that, which is originally kind of a conservative Republican idea for small government. I think, as will become clear over the last 4 years, Trump's presidency is nothing like any kind of historical positives from conservatism.
Yeah.
It's kind of only the bad things.
America's also just so big. It's like, why is Hawaii and Utah in the same country? Like, I'm going to say it till the day I die, but it's just like these places are completely different demographics.
Yeah,
lifestyles, cultures.
Histories, backgrounds. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Politics.
Doesn't make any sense.
Like, that's a big deal. Yeah, that's true.
Like, in Canada, we have 11 provinces, and like there's still huge disparities, but at least it's like, there's 11 of us, we can find our similarities.
Roughly a tenth of the population
of
America. To kind of bring back what I just said, Nancy Pelosi recently was called out for saying that America needs a strong Republican Party, and the Republican Party's done a lot of good for America historically. And I get why that's controversial, because people think she's just pandering to try and get votes or whatever. But I think we've said that before, that society is usually just a tug of war between the right and left, and no side is like completely correct or completely wrong. That kind of sounds like we're sitting on the fence. We're not. We're just saying that I don't think you should outright vilify people unless they're holding actual evil views.
Which I'd say the current party does.
But that's what she was saying, though. She was saying there is an okay version of a Republican Party. Yeah. This isn't it. But her saying that seemed to be controversial, or was controversial.
Yeah.
But I agree with her completely on that.
Yeah, because it's like in Canada we've had a liberal party for the last like 8 years or so, and it's like it seems like there's going to be a conservative party voted in next, and I'm like, it's not going to be the end of the world, won't be like the best, but at least they believe in climate change and socialism to an extent. Like, they're not going to repeal healthcare and like a bunch of random stuff like that, like the current Republicans in America do. Anyway, what's next on my list of things about Biden?
No, I'll give you Trump's thoughts on gun violence.
What's that?
He's a very fierce supporter of the Second Amendment, so yeah.
Yeah.
And well, his supporters are, and that means that he is, because I think more than, I know that we say that Trump kind of, what he says his supporters believe, but I think it's a little bit more the other way around, that he does accurately reflect that portion of America, and they're kind of fiercely, obviously pro-guns, so I think he is as well in office.
Yeah.
I think that the actual, like, Trump's own personal beliefs are a mystery.
Yeah, they're not reflected in...
They might be, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. People say that he was a Democrat for most of his life, but it's hard to say what that even means, especially he's probably always just voted in his own best interests as a very rich
person. I think so. And I imagine just became like this canvas to just be like, and then he just kind of absorbed whatever was thrown at him and made it into this.
I mean, technically that's what politicians are supposed to do.
Yeah.
They're supposed to reflect what the populace wants.
Yeah.
The issue is with the mass and intense polarization in America, you're always only reflecting what half the country wants, so c'est difficile.
I talked a little bit now about Biden's response to Corona. He had these 4 things listed on his website, and it was called Build Back Better, and it was like dash then this. And so he wants racial equity across the American economy, economic recovery for working families, support child and aging people's education and care workers, and then build back sustainably. So they're going to have to obviously do a ton of work to rebuild the economy and social structures, but he wants to do so equitably, inclusively, and sustainably.
I mean, those are all just kind of buzzwords.
They are, yeah. But I mean, like, that's what he's putting forward. He says, we don't want to just build it back, we want to build back better.
Democrat,
the Biden way.
That's just kind of like a basic Democrat, or in Canada, liberal, like, it doesn't mean anything to me.
No, I know, but...
It reminds me of when corporations say stuff about Black History Month. Shut up, Nestle, or Democrats. Like, no one believes you.
Yeah.
One thing which is maybe of note with that is that there were a decent amount, I think, of, maybe in 2016, maybe not so much now, a decent amount of like immigrants or African Americans who were saying, we're tired of these Democrats pretending to care about us. We'll just vote Trump, or we'll just not vote.
Yeah.
More likely. And I think that's wrong, because it's not like Trump is any better for anyone who doesn't look like him. I thought it was hilarious when he compares himself. He says he's done more for Black America than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. It's just kind of, it's such a laughable boast. Yeah, I don't even know what can you even say about that. Alicia's just shaking her head.
I don't know. It's just like, America's so... I'm too baffled by it. Like, I was very blue coming into this episode, because it's just like, I don't know. Like, no one's represented in these
Very blue
parties.
as in very democratic? Very Democrat?
Yeah.
Or very blue as in very sad?
Very sad.
Oh.
Because it's just like, there's so many people who just aren't, their voices can't be heard in the current structure. I can see how you'd feel hopeless and not want to vote for anyone, because it just isn't a democracy.
Yeah.
And your voice just isn't going to be heard. Then you read this and you're like, well, it looks like Biden's going to be doing it. Like, still vote for Biden. But it's just like, I really hope that he's actually inclusive in building back the economy and thinks of people who have these like intergenerational disadvantages and who have just for generations been like screwed out of opportunities in education and social support and have to turn to crime as a result. It's just like, just lame. Another thing, this is unrelated, but you said like, just shut up when they list all these things, but it's like, on last week's episode about dark academia, we were saying, even if someone says, or like a corporation says, or no, it was on the fashion episodes, saying, wash your clothes less or live sustainably, but then they don't actually back it up, at least they're maybe encouraging the people to like internalize those mindsets.
No, I think it matters.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why I would vote for Biden and the Democrats every time over the Republicans. Because people say like, oh, well, you know, the Republicans are outwardly racist, but the Democrats are just as bad, you know, secretly racist and stuff like that. I'm like, but it matters that you're not saying racist things outwardly. It really matters. Or that you're
just
not,
like emboldens racists.
It's like, okay, Democrats don't do much for the environment, but it matters that they say they believe in climate change. Like, it matters that they kind of lie or perform like that.
Because it inspires corporations who actually have influence over people's lives.
Well,
And people.
I remember that inspires people, yeah. I think something which was lost in the last election was that there are a lot of kids that look at government, especially in the US, where it's almost like an indoctrination.
Yeah.
And it's all part of the curriculum, and it's all over the news. There's a lot of kids who look up to elections.
People like in the United States want to be the president when they grow up.
Yeah. So kind of the basic, first and foremost role is like, is this person a good example for the children?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like genuinely important.
I think so.
I remember I got really kind of emotional in 2016 when Trump was elected. I was like, what are the kids going to think looking up at this? So yeah, I think that matters, as kind of sentimental as it sounds. So I think when they're talking about diversity or equality, whatever it is, like that matters.
It does.
Because then you don't have kids in the cafeteria chanting, build that wall.
Right.
Like it's a big difference.
It is. Speaking of build that wall, onto immigration.
Okay.
Biden will forcefully pursue policies that safeguard our security, provide a fair and just system that helps to grow and enhance our economy and secure cherished values. That was his statement on immigration, and I was like, that's
specific.
It's a lot. I think there should be like a modernized immigration system, and I don't know what it currently is, but I just think it needs to be modernized to reflect what America actually is versus like maybe what they say they are when it comes to like how they incorporate people from outside of the country. I don't know much about immigration.
Immigration is definitely not either of our strong suits, but you know what is?
What?
The environment.
Yeah.
So that's the name of this podcast, the Environmental Podcast. So we're not going to talk about the environment of these two platforms at all, because next week we're doing a whole episode all about the Democrats, what they say about the environment, the Republicans, what they don't say about the environment, and also the much forgotten American Green Party. And we're also going to be shedding some light on the Libertarian Party, because one thing that people, I think, whatever their political views, should be in agreement on is that the debates, the federal debates between parties, should have more than two people on.
Well, yeah.
It's just a way of funneling people into the two parties, funneling voters into the two parties. In Canada, we have
four main parties.
Four big ones.
Yeah, and they're all debates for the most part.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. You should be able to hear several different perspectives, not just two that are just basically two extremes.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely part of the polarization, because it's like in Canada, you say there are four parties. It's something like a spectrum across the left and right, and in terms of environmentalism as well. Whereas in America, it's like you're this or you're this.
Yeah.
What I like other countries, even in Australia, they have on the ballot, and other countries have this as well. And they have an option for neither, or like none of the above. I just think that would be interesting to see how many people voted for that, because it's not the same as just not showing up to vote.
Mm-hmm.
It would show how many people just don't care versus how many people don't care for either candidate. Trump's views on immigration are well known.
Yeah.
So don't really need to go into that.
My final thing was healthcare, which we talked a little bit about with the corona response, but Biden's plan
We actually didn't mention the corona response at all.
Oh, I thought I did. Anyway, Biden's plan is to protect and expand Obamacare, basically, because Trump has been trying to make changes, has made some changes, I believe, to it to make it more challenging. Like if you have a pre-existing condition, you can't get Obamacare now or something. But Biden wants to make it more accessible because he has a lot of experience with health issues and has seen many families kind of like broken down, become bankrupt because someone in the family has become ill and they've not been able to afford it.
Yeah.
And
Trump wants to repeal everything about Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. I think mostly because it has Obama's name on it. He wants to repeal everything to do with that guy.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. Healthcare, it seems like if Trump he's been promising healthcare reform since 2015. Hasn't happened. If he manages to get reelected and pass something, from the outside looking in, I know this is flippant when there's a lot of people's health and wellness at stake, but it just seems like it's an incremental change either way.
I suppose.
Especially as us living in Canada, and we're like, it should just be like this. This should be the human right.
Yeah.
We were big Bernie fans.
We were.
Biden's also been pretty outspoken about what he would have done had he been president for this COVID outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, we would have shut down the country and kept it shut down. You know, he's been opposed to Trump reopening so quick. He says we would have had the military and like medics and supplies and stuff on hand, which sounds kind of like someone would say to get elected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like I'm kind of the dramatic leadery guy. But I mean, Trump's views on COVID have been laughable.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that he got COVID. I don't know, there's not really much to say on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, haha, he was against it and then he got it, or he downplayed it and then he got it. I think Biden probably would have handled it better. I think most people probably would have handled it better in terms of deaths and cases and stuff like that. I think when people try and pin the recession and the economic downturn on Trump, it seems a little bit,
Yeah, it would have happened either way.
yeah.
But it's just so many people wouldn't have died. And this is a big connection to like the postal service, because I was reading a bit about that, and Trump's been really sketchy with mail-in voting. But the reason that became an issue is because a bunch of postal service workers died because they weren't able to take time off if they got sick, and then they were going everywhere, interacting with each other. It's just like, he would have, if he had have made it seem like a believable thing, people would have just stayed home. But when the president of a country says this isn't real, people are just going to go out.
There's definitely this issue of, I know we said that like the president's a big role model. That's probably a great example of it.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking mainly about kids. Like there is an issue about, you kind of alluded to it earlier, this cult of personality and the extreme individualization, which is all through America, but even their politics, where like the president says something and everyone's like, oh, okay. It's like people should be adults and they should be able
Critical
to think for
thinkers.
themselves.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not, but you know, they should be.
I know. I wrote on the top of my page critical thinking, because it's just like, that's something we're taught from a pretty young age, but it's just like, I wonder if that's not taught in America, or if people just don't
It's the key to
internalizing
democracy.
it. Yeah,
Democracy
it is.
doesn't work if you don't have an informed populace.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, it's not a quote by me, but yeah.
My final thing I wanted to talk about was the vice president, but do you have any other points from Trump's platform that you wanted to mention?
One thing I saw was that he wants to bring down the number of overseas troops, specifically in random countries like Germany and also still in Afghanistan, which makes sense to me. I mean, he seems like one thing which is, I always look for positives in Trump's platform, just because I think it's a good exercise to do. He seems like he's pretty good about not getting in wars. I mean, it hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened.
And you could say that's a very low standard, but most presidents struggle with it.
It's true.
It seems,
It's true.
especially in, like, we're in a very crazy time. Seems like he's doing okay. He's very big on ending manufacturing reliance on China, which again seems like a pretty good idea. It seems like he's trying to think a little bit ahead. Probably presidents in the past should have looked at this.
I think so.
I actually think that's a decent amount of Trump's foreign policy. The stuff that people jibe him for is instances where he's been given a bit of a tough situation. I remember with North Korea a couple of years ago, everyone's like, what is Trump doing? You know, trying to forge relations and stuff. And I'm like, other countries should have dealt with North Korea ages ago.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where any elected president basically has to just go keep away from it completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he should get credit for trying to deal with it a little bit. It was definitely for the wrong reasons, and it was to try and appeal to that strongman sense of America as the world's police kind of thing. But I don't know, it's still maybe noteworthy. I don't think he deserves like a Nobel Peace Prize for it, like some people thought. And yeah, so with the China, there's a kind of mini trade war with like tariffs and stuff like that, which he's also imposed on other countries, various EU exports, and even some products from Canada. It's all about America first. Let's bring manufacturing back. What do you think to that?
I think he says a lot of that, but he also has incentivized people to export offshore.
To export?
To export manufacturing. So like he's still getting people to, he's making it so that it's less expensive to manufacture your products offshore. And like I know he's imposing tariffs and stuff, but he's still giving out incentives to people to do that. Maybe not in China, but maybe in Mexico or India. But I still think manufacturing locally is a good thing. And that was a part of his platform. Maybe that's why some people voted for him.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're for that.
Yeah. But he hasn't really put his words into action.
I mean, there were a ton of new manufacturing jobs. It's something like 400,000. and the economy was doing well before COVID. But I saw people were basically thinking that was about the ceiling. It's not like that growth would have continued.
Yeah.
And also most of the manufacturing jobs were in sectors we're not big fans of. Automobile, oil, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's a noble sentiment, I suppose. Let's bring jobs home. Probably every president says that. Every candidate says that.
Probably. Biden says it.
Yeah.
He wants them to be in the clean energy sector because he wants a clean energy revolution or
just
whatever.
Just without that kind of nationalistic bend to it that is an undercurrent to everything Trump says. Anything else about his platform? No.
So I just wanted to round it up by talking about the vice president, Kamala Harris. And she's pretty cool. She was the second African American woman and first South Asian American to serve in the U.S. Senate. She's the third ever, woman to appear on a ballot as someone's running mate. She's really into healthcare and immigration policies, banning assault rifles. She has opposed Trump's administration for 4 years because she's been in the Senate the last 4 years, so she's kind of seen it all, knows all the ins and outs of his policies and such. She actually attended all of her education up until university in Quebec, so un petit peu français.
Oui.
Yeah, she's kind of cool. Seems really smart. I'd like her as a running mate, probably.
Yeah, seems like a good VP. I thought it was a pretty safe pick. She kind of appeals to both sides. She's kind of a center-left, much like Biden was before this kind of coalition with the more progressive Democrats, which has resulted in the current platform. Yeah, it seems like a safe pick. It obviously covers a different demographic to him. So I think it was fairly predictable. Mike Pence, meanwhile.
What about Mike Pence? Meme-worthy guy.
I think that he has small eyes. He's got that going for him, I guess. No, he's awful. He's awful.
He seems so evil. Just comedically evil. It's just how can this
Most of the Republicans are.
Oh my goodness. It's just
You got to be careful though, because watch what you say. He might come after us once he's next president.
Scared. I'm scared of him. I'm scared of Trump, but I'm really scared of Mike Pence. It just seems like he's pulling all the strings, he's this creepy puppet master he's like Geppetto, but evil.
Pike Mence. I just remember in the kind of leaked document where Trump was looking for a vice president, and they were Pence wasn't their first choice. They went to a bunch of people.
Wasn't Mark Zuckerberg his first choice?
No, that was on Hillary's list. Hillary wanted
that was
a bunch
joke,
of billionaires.
Her list.
Yeah, Trump's outline of what his vice president would do, it said vice president would be in charge of domestic and foreign policy. I was like, what? And then I think it literally said president is in charge of making America great again. This is a few years ago, so I don't remember, but I think
that
it
seems
said
right.
that.
I think that's what it was. He would literally just be the face of it. That Mike Pence would be the president of the United States.
Watch out for Pensy.
We should make shirts that say that.
Watch out for Pensy.
Our merch would do so much better than Biden's merch.
Yeah, Biden's merch wasn't very good. So we talked about the platforms. One thing which stuck out to me is I said that his platform for this specific election is pretty much nowhere to be seen. It's mostly all reactionary to what the Democrats want. Mm-hmm. Is that there's this discussion of, okay, his first famous slogan was "Make America Great Again," and now it's kind of keep America great, even though most people on the street probably say not much has changed for the better. And the funny thing to me was all this year and earlier, Trump pointing to the Black Lives Matter protests and the riots and saying, "See everyone, this is what a Biden presidency would look like." And I was like, but this is a Trump presidency. You are the president, but he kind of gets around that by doing this thing where he completely absolves himself and his government his federal government of any responsibility for Democrat-run states and even Democrat-run cities, which I think is just completely outrageous behavior from a president, but to be expected from him.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's just so inflammatory and so committed to increasing this ideological gap, which pretty much paints their entire country by now.
Mm-hmm. It didn't seem so extreme before him. It was just people on the left and right disagreed, but it's not like people on the right were so hateful of just anyone who was different from them, or at least not
I was looking into this a while ago about whether this thing about increased polarization in America is a myth or not.
It might be. I just might have made that up, but it seems true.
Basically, it's always been about 50-50.
Really?
which is why they kind of trade elections every few years.
Hmm.
Like if it was one side always winning, then there wouldn't be so many switches back and forth between Republican and Democrat.
Yeah.
As it is, they almost never stay for like longer than 2 terms. But I think what has happened is that trying to draw like a line with my hands in the air, if both sides were kind of balancing right and left before,
Yeah.
now it's like the right kind of went way right, so the left maybe tries to do the same thing to balance out. The two camps are like the same size, but they've pretty much gotten further apart, I think.
Yeah, that seems right. Just more extreme.
Yeah. It's kind of like that thing about, I don't remember the name for it, but Trump basically moved the window of what is acceptable, both politically and just in terms of his behavior and his discourse.
Yeah.
And he just kind of normalized increasingly more outrageous behavior.
Yeah. Because we were saying, like, any other year, if Biden said, like, half the things he said, that would have been enough to ruin his run.
Yeah.
And then it's just like,
it's true.
he's being opposed by someone even more outrageous that it's like...
Trump has normalized the absolute election-crushing headline quote every other day.
Yeah.
So that now none of them crush any elections.
Mm-hmm.
So that Biden saying, even accidentally, poor kids are just as smart as white kids, just doesn't get any traction because it's like, you know, Trump says stuff like that all the time, which is true.
Yeah.
Can we say that it's a disgrace that both these candidates are the two options for America?
Yes.
As much as we like Biden, I think had he been 10 to 15 years younger, he'd be a great choice.
Yeah.
But I just think that 70-plus-year-old people...
Like, that used to be, like, the cap life expectancy for an American a few years ago.
They don't represent the population.
They don't.
Whatsoever. And I know they have, like, you have to be 35 to run. I think maybe you could drop that to 25. And I also think if there's a minimum, there should be a maximum.
I agree. It just should be the retirement age.
That's a good idea. And I know people say that with age comes wisdom. Like, that's the idea for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's theoretically why so much of the US Senate and Congress is so old.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe it. I just say, no, it doesn't. It's like young people in American politics seem pretty wise as well. Or they seem more wise.
Yeah, and there's probably some exceptions. Bernie.
Yeah, but I wish Bernie hadn't been...
He shouldn't have had to be spending his final few years on the planet just, like, grinding out these policies and...
Like, as much as I love
essays.
Bernie, it was pretty depressing seeing that debate between he and Biden.
Yeah, that was sad. Yeah, younger people should be given a chance. They'd be really good politicians, but they don't really get the opportunity to.
Well, the problem is that it comes from, in America, a lifetime of making connections, finding donors, you know, networking, stuff like that. It's not about your ideas at all. So that's a bit of our discussion between those two candidates. I want to talk a little bit about media coverage.
Okay.
Because pretty much from 2016 to now, people have blamed Trump's election, at least in some form, on the media.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, you know, the media wanted this. Hope you're happy now. Media for giving him so much airtime. But at the time, I was kind of thinking, I mean, he was a candidate who was a billionaire who came onto the scene and said a bunch of crazy stuff. It's like, he's going to get airtime. What should the media do? Not show it? And especially now, even, it's like, they show it even more because he's the president saying all this stuff. So what are they going to do? No, you can't not show it. I think people are just upset because he found a way to completely manipulate everything in his favor.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's incredibly impressive in that way. Yeah, media are kind of have their hands tied in that regard. I think they make mistakes in other ways. But I'm pretty conspiratorial, and I think the media can be quite malicious and do things on purpose. They've definitely helped Biden, I would say.
I think so.
Why do you say that?
So I think if there was no media and they were just like trying to nominate someone to lead that party, it would have been Bernie. Because Bernie just represented the ideas more than Biden did.
Right.
More charismatic, I suppose, more of like a icon. But then it just seemed like right when they were trying to make that decision, Biden just got a ton of coverage. It was all about him and Obama and like his past.
I think you can chalk that up to the Democrat field being so crowded, mostly with centrists, and they all dropped out at the same time and all gave their votes. Basically, all those votes just went to Biden.
Yeah.
Which was unfortunate. And also the fact that Elizabeth Warren kind of split the vote with Bernie, and she held on longer than all the centrists did.
That's true.
But I mean, Biden won that election. That just happened. Bernie didn't get the votes. I think young people don't vote.
They need to.
Do you think they need to for the upcoming election?
Yeah. If all the youngies voted for Biden, he would just win.
All the youngies.
But it's only the elders voting.
Why are you talking like that? The elders.
The elders and the youngies. Anyway.
Okay. Any predictions for the election? And do you think Trump having COVID has swung it anyway? Do you think it's gotten some votes against him? Moved any votes anywhere?
I don't know. I think if anything, it would get random votes for him.
Sympathy votes?
And people would be like, oh, now he's going to respond to COVID and he'll have this, like, experience.
Yeah.
I just think it's such a... Like, I was, until recently, very convinced Trump would win again.
Me too.
Just because it's like, the people that voted for him are probably going to vote for him again.
No votes are moving.
No.
Very few votes are moving.
It's only if they've mobilized young people and people who chose not to vote or whatever.
Yeah, the question is, like, can Biden get enough people who are Trump voters? Mainly from the Rust Belt and the swing states and the people who are kind of about American industry, American jobs. Pre-COVID, I was pretty confident. I was like, okay, Trump's going to win again. He has the election going okay. But then COVID happened and he completely dropped the ball and killed 200,000 Americans. If there's one thing people don't like, it's like to see their compatriots die unnecessarily.
Well, yeah.
So if I was Biden and the Democrats, we were saying it to ourselves, like at the debates and in the messaging, I would just say nothing else other than Trump killed 200,000 Americans.
Because he just needs to be held accountable for that.
Yeah.
And be it by losing the election or by being incarcerated, whatever.
But yeah, pre-COVID, I was like, Trump's going to win. Post-COVID, I think Biden's going to win. I think it'll be very close. I think the mail-ins are going to muddy everything and it's going to be just a mess all around and probably some more civil unrest. And unless there's some kind of controversy involving Biden over the next month, which is completely within the realms of possibility, we know that the Trump campaign is pretty good at manufacturing those anyway.
Yeah, I'm also worried about the mail-ins because I was looking into it and it's like voter fraud just isn't something that's common. There's been a few like very...
How would you know?
Because it's almost always caught.
How do you know?
Because it's like if you get 100 ballots delivered by this one guy and they're all for Biden, then you know that something's been tampered with.
They found ballots in a garbage bin and they all had Trump's name on it.
Yeah.
I'm joking. I'm just echoing what he said from the debate.
It's just like voter fraud isn't a thing, but then Trump goes and like buys out the United States Postal Service and it's just like, no, he like elected this guy to be in charge of it. He's like the post general or whatever now. And he's like removing post offices, slowing down postage services. It's just like there's going to be weird stuff where people just can't vote.
American politics is such a circus. That's all I have to say about it. I think most people, everyone complains about that, but I think most people like it for that. Yeah. I think most Americans want it to be like that.
Probably.
I know, like, when the debate was happening a week ago, I was like, sweet, this will be entertaining. True. Like, most people enjoy that. I think that's part of the kind of sick appeal that Trump has.
Yeah.
It's like he makes people want to watch C-SPAN. No one else wanted to watch that before.
Yeah.
And even on the left, the politicians which are gaining popularity, Bernie, AOC, are the ones who make C-SPAN entertaining, or the ones who have witty comebacks on Twitter, or the ones who are funny speakers. That might be a function of, again, the extreme size of America, of the country, and the fact that no one personally knows or has probably ever seen in real life a senator, congressman, or president.
They feel unaffected by their choices.
Well, they all just seem like distant characters.
Yeah.
So we like the funny ones, basically. That might be a good observation. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about that more next week, when we're not so muddled and exhausted.
Yeah.
We're sorry for that hour-long scraggly conversation.
I'm sorry. I should have done better, but I was just so overwhelmed in preparing for this episode because it just removes me of all hope. But
next week we'll be talking environmentalism, which fills us with hope.
It does.
Well, it might
That's
not.
why we talk about the environment.
But we'll see. You can find us on Instagram in the meantime at @the_environmental, where we post just our thoughts about politics, news, the internet, mental health, the environment, art, culture, history, everything which comes to mind. And some selfies sometimes.
Yeah, it's a fun spot. You can follow us there at @the_environmental and listen to next week's episode if you're interested in the environmental platforms of the candidates.